violence is self-defeating. He who lives by the sword will perish by the sword.
You know, when you construct a man as a great man, there's nothing almost more satisfying than also seeing him as the opposite.
When the National Archive puts government documents up on the web, one has to confront them.
Tapes from the hotel rooms, FBI reports, those are pieces of information that we shouldn't have. The FBI was most alarmed about King because of his success.
He realized how sick this country was. We were trying to reveal the truth about segregation.
J. Edgar Hoover is famous for saying that he feared the rise of a black messiah.
The FBI says it's clear Martin Luther King Jr. is the most dangerous Negro in America, and we have to use every resource at our disposal to destroy him.
J. Edgar Hoover was the head of the FBI for 48 years.
The FBI's focus was collecting salacious sexual material of King with various girlfriends.
Hoover had made the speech that Martin Luther King was the world's most notorious liar.
Now, what am I going to do about Martin Luther King? Looks to me like he's too far gone.
This was a way that they could bring down a very influential black civil rights leader and contain the movement.
The FBI mailed a tape of Dr. King with other women to him and to Coretta with an advice that he should go kill himself.
The greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
Staying calm under fire is very hard when people are trying to kill you.
Anybody who was to the left of mainstream in civil rights was deemed a subversive.
They use surveillance in order to
Foment violence.
break apart these organizations.
They were running a surveillance state.
This represents the darkest part of the Bureau's history.
Hi, my name is Gil Robertson, president of the African American Film Critics Association. And today for AAFCA Roundtables, we are speaking to the great one, Mr. Sam Pollard, on his latest documentary, MLK versus FBI, that will be opening, be available around the country via VOD. So we're gonna introduce you to the members who are taking part in our roundtable today, starting with Katia Woods in Philadelphia, KB in Houston, Al McGee in South Florida, Reggie Pounder in Chicago, Ray Cornelius in Atlanta, Carolyn Hinds in Toronto, Rasha Penrice in Atlanta, Okema Gunn in Chicago, Nancy Greene in Los Angeles, and Sharronda Williams in Atlanta. I'm gonna let you guys take it away, and I will see you on the other side.
This is Reggie Pounder out of Chicago, and thank you for doing this piece. It had a lot of meaning to me on so many levels. My question is that you revealed a lot here, yet still there's a lot to be revealed with the release of the tapes on the 27th. 2027, excuse me. What prompted you to do it now as opposed to wait for those tapes to come out?
Because Reggie, I'd be too old, man.
Was that it?
No. The reality is I had just finished a film called Two Trains Running, about the search in 1964 for two iconic blues musicians, Son House and Skip James. And the producer of that documentary had just read this book about King and the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover surveilling Dr. King. And he said to me that he thought that should be our next film. So the gentleman who wrote the book, a gentleman named David Garrow, had been one of the major consultants when I worked on Eyes on the Prize too. So we reached out to him. We took an option on the book. He said yes. And then we went to Pittsburgh where he lived, and we spent 4 to 5 hours with him around 2017, interviewing him on camera about the book, about the genesis, about the relationship between King and Hoover and the FBI. That became the basis for the film. And you know, as you all know, I've done lots of films about the civil rights struggle and this history, and I felt this was a way to look at it from another perspective, and that was the motivation to do it.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, KB here with the Color Grade podcast, a wonderful documentary that, in my opinion, just seamlessly, blends kind of reporting with that footage. So talk about creatively if there was anything new or surprising that you found out while gathering all of this footage for this particular documentary.
You know, when you're doing these archival films, you're always looking to find new material, unheard of or unseen material, and the way to do that is to hire yourself a very talented archival producer. And in this case, we brought in a young man named Brian Becker, who I think did an extraordinary job in finding some stuff I had never seen before. So, for example, the footage of the Kings with their children and with his parents when they were young, the stills of Dr. King at the dinner table with Coretta Scott and playing outside with his son. You know, even the footage that he found of James Earl Ray in the custody of Scotland Yard. That's material I had never seen before. So it's always great when you do it. You feel sometimes when you're making these archival documentary films like an archaeologist, like you go into a dig and you uncover new stuff, you know, new gems. And that's always both exciting and invigorating part of the process of making a film like this. So, you know, it's always good to find new things. I mean, as you know, I've seen a lot of this stuff before, the March on Washington, the Montgomery bus boycott. But the one thing I had never seen the Montgomery bus boycott was that early interview of Dr. King with that Southern news reporter. I had never seen that before. So that was also like, wow. And you see how young and vital Dr. King is, you know, with his slick hat, you know, that's good stuff to see. I mean, it's always great to, you know, to me, we're seeing our history. And to me, I've always loved history as a young man, and I love our history, and I love being able to sort of pull it out and present it to the world.
Well, thank you. It's a fantastic documentary.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Pollard, Nancy Greene.
Hey, Nancy.
Can you hear me? Hi.
Yes.
Hi. Okay, my question is also in relation to the 2027 releases. I wanted to know, to what extent do you think that sort of thing still goes on with civil rights and social justice leaders, and how do you think the release will impact the way that people see that type of thing as a whole and the influence that leaders have?
I think we should all be mindful that the government forces, the FBI, which is the American police force, they are still constantly surveilling anybody they think might be left of center. If you're not following what they call the American way, the notion of American democracy, you're going to be monitored, you're going to be surveilled, you're going to be wiretapped, you're going to be bugged. There's going to be informants in your organization. We all know that even every organization, even like Black Lives Matter, there are informants in there. There are people reporting to the FBI what's going on in these organizations, you know. So even though Comey says in the film, this period was the darkest period in the history of the FBI, I kind of chuckle to myself because, you know, we all know there's some darker stuff in the annals of the FBI. You know, we've seen how the CIA has toppled democracies in other countries to bring in dictatorships. You know, America is complicit in a lot of dirty stuff, you know, so we should not be surprised. This documentary should be a documentary that is shown in the public schools, in the middle schools, in the high schools, and even in the adult community, so people can understand that what we saw last week, and we all know as Black people, that what we saw last week at the Capitol is not an anomaly. That's part of what America's all about. You know, when they used to run into Black communities and lynch people and destroy communities, that's the same stuff we saw last week. When you heard them say, hang Pence, that's what white people were saying back when Jim Crow became part of the DNA of America. they'd go into communities like Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they would say, hang these Black people, destroy these communities. You know, the Red Summer of 1919. Listen, it's in America's DNA. I hope I answered your questions, Nancy.
Yes, yes, thank you.
How you doing, Mr. Pollard? My name's Al McGee. I'm from South Florida.
Hey, man.
First of all, let me congratulate you on Mr. Soul. That was
Mr. Soul, Ellis Hayes.
And now this one, MLK/FBI, is a wonderful documentary. But my question to you is this. The segment about Clarence Jones, I know you get a chance to really interview these people, but his wife told him that, the phone company came in there and put something in there, and he suspected that the FBI was tapping his phone. What do you think about him not warning Dr. King that his phones could be tapped? Because Dr. King came by his house and Dr. King talked to him on numerous occasions. Why do you think Clarence Jones did not warn Dr. King that his lines were tapped by the FBI?
Oh, I'm not sure that's what he said. I think he told Dr. King that there was a possibility that they were being tapped. And I think, even though he says Dr. King didn't initially take it seriously, I don't personally believe that he didn't. I think he was just trying to sort of basically say, oh no, I know I don't really think it's happening, but I think he really knew what's happening. I think Clarence probably did inform Dr. King, and Dr. King was reluctant initially to admit it, but how could he not think that the FBI wasn't monitoring him? I mean, Dr. King was too smart not to think that wasn't happening. I mean, you can see he was a very intelligent man, very thoughtful man. He had to know that being front and center of the civil rights struggle in the 50s and 60s, he was going to be a target. He wasn't a target just for people who wanted to hurt him. He was a target of the people of the government who basically said, uh-oh, he's turning upside down this notion of what America's supposed to be. America that we all know, they told us was supposed to be father knows best, apple pie, Black people are supposed to be on the fringes of things. They're not supposed to be front and center. Oh, we know they're there, but they're not supposed to do much. They sit in the back of the bus, they sit in the, back of the trains. King was saying this should be a different America. And that frightened people like J. Edgar Hoover. And Hoover was just a voice of America as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, at that time. Well, thank you for your answer, and congratulations on this wonderful documentary.
Thank you.
Mr. Pollard, how are you?
I'm good, sir.
Ray Cornelius here with Upfront Inside the Entertainment Industry. Wanted to know, did you have any challenges with this film? I know you've done a myriad of other projects, but did you have any challenges with this particular project?
The biggest challenge is to always, corral the beast. And what I mean by that is that our first cut was over 2.5 hours, and we needed to be able to get it down to what I call a good fighting weight. I usually believe that most documentaries should be no more than an hour and a half or an hour and 40 minutes. And with the cut being over 2.5 hours, we had to make some very ruthless decisions about what to take out. Even though we had a much fuller story, the pacing and the rhythm of it made it cumbersome. So that's always the big challenge, And some people always suffer with the idea that they had to cut out their babies. I don't suffer with that idea. I mean, to me, my idea is I cut the stuff out to make a really good film. And I don't think back to, oh my God, we should have put this in, we should have put that in. I don't remember. I have amnesia now. I don't remember what we took out, because now what we got the film down to is what I think the film should be.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for speaking with us, Mr. Pollard. It's Carolyn for our Here's What Happened podcast.
Hey, Carolyn.
Hi, and my question has to do with the editing process and selecting the images and the archival footage that you use to go along with the script of the narrators. So could you tell me a bit about choosing the photos, the audio tapes, and also with regards to particularly the shots, like the animated footage of films like Birth of a Nation and the racist cartoons that they had back in that era?
Well, when you're putting together these films, you want to try to find all the material that you think is going to help tell the narrative, tell the story. And I knew, you know, as I said, I was very familiar with the March on Washington, the Montgomery bus boycott. So we needed all this material to help have that narrative unfold. And then we wanted to go back and find material about the development of the mythology of the FBI, you know, through the old archival footage, through J. Edgar Hoover's interviews, through the old movie clips from the old Hollywood films. So, you know, we're always trying to find all that stuff. And as I was saying, you come up with some surprises. You find some stills that you've never seen before. You find some archival footage you've never seen before. And you have to be constantly tenacious. You can't give up on the idea that you might uncover something new. You should never be satisfied to say, oh, I think we have enough. You're always trying to find more and more and more, because you always will have surprises. And that's part of the big challenge when you're making these films, to keep pushing yourself to find this material.
Hi, I'm Okema Gunn. I'm with 7 Gunn Media. Thank you for doing this film. It's amazing. It's a great historical feat. My question is, Carolyn talked about the archival footage and how you mostly used pictures and things like that, and there weren't necessarily interviews. But my question would be, what maybe one scene or one clip that connected to you personally? Because I know there's a lot of things in there, but what one thing connected to you personally, maybe from your childhood, or something that connected to you personally as a director?
Well, you know, 1968, April 2nd, I turned 18 years old. I lived in the projects in East Harlem. My dad was a janitor, my mother was a housekeeper. And we used to have, in a lot of Black homes back then, there was 3 pictures we had on the wall. It was Martin Luther King, it was John Fitzgerald Kennedy, and it was Jesus Christ. Those were the 3. So here I am turning 18 April 2nd, 1968. 2 days later, April 4th, I'm in my apartment, my family's apartment, and Walter Cronkite, who was at that time considered the voice of American news, comes on and says, news break, Dr. Martin Luther King was just assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. I said, whoa, what happened? You know, it was like shock. And I had a shock 5 years before with the assassination of John F. Kennedy when I was 13 years old. So what's happened for me, you know, is as I've gotten older, many of these memories that I kind of had pushed way back, you know, when I'm working on these documentaries, they come flooding back because they connect to my past. I mean, I was a teenager, you know, I was a young man at that period. So Dr. King was a major presence in our community, in my household. We heard his voice, we saw his image. So in some ways, you know, Kim, it just sort of makes sense that the films that I'm doing now, and this could be as I'm getting to my elder years, I'm reflecting more on my past and the things that are sort of part of my past, and that was it. He was in my past, he was a part of it. It wasn't like it was something like I didn't know. I was, you know, like a lot of us African Americans, Dr. King was my, you know, he was like iconic to us. He was an iconic presence. So it just sort of makes sense that I'd want to dig into it. I mean, the difference now is I'm not 18 years old anymore, and I don't see Dr. King or anybody in sort of a one-dimensional way. I see them in more complicated ways, which is what I was trying to do with this film.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Sharronda Williams from Pay Your Weight. I like that you bring up the complexities of these people, because as I've gotten older, from what I was taught about Dr. King in school versus actually reading up and watching documentaries, we get to see that there were complexities, or even some may say flaws, to who Dr. King was as a man. And I wanted to know, for you as a filmmaker, how do you really balance upholding the legacy of someone as Dr. King, who's done so much, but also finding ways to balance the complexities of who he is as a man, as a husband, and as a leader as a whole?
Sharronda, you do it carefully, delicately. You try not to make it exploitive. And if you do it that way, you feel like you're doing a decent service to the man and his legacy. And that's how you always have to approach it. I mean, you know, I don't think of myself as a sensationalist. You know, here's an opportunity to exploit the seamy side of Dr. King. That's not the job. The job is to show that he was human. You know, he was a man who was dealing on many fronts. He's a leader of the civil rights movement. He's dealing with the idea that he's being monitored constantly by the FBI. He's dealing with the fact that, oh my God, he's given the Nobel Peace Prize. How do I handle that? He's dealing with the fact that by 67, he decides it's not just about the civil rights movement. He decides he wants to come out against Vietnam, knowing full well it will sever irreparably his relationship with Lyndon Baines Johnson in the White House. I mean, this man had a lot on his shoulders, and dealing with he had a very, to be understated, a complicated personal life. So all of these things are taking place, like many of us have complicated lives, you know, and he was negotiating all these things, you know, sometimes probably good, sometimes not so good, you know, and that's what I wanted to hopefully happen as we did this film. Hopefully that comes through.
No, it definitely did. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Rhonda, so what was this film? What film you said had no sound in it?
Oh no, when HBO aired the Atlanta child murders.
Oh, they messed up. There was no sound for the first 10 minutes. Oh, it was terrible.
We went off on Twitter. We went off.
Yeah. We were all confused. I said, what's going on?
Well, it destroyed the momentum because the first episode it was trending, and then it didn't trend anymore after that.
Yeah.
So we were very disappointed. And I saw the 2 Trains one too. That was an interesting one about the blues singers.
Well, you know, my family's from Mississippi, so that's close to me too, you know.
Yeah. Well, my family's from Mississippi.
What part of Mississippi?
But
what part of Mississippi?
Brookhaven, which is outside of Jackson.
My family's from Macon.
From Macon. Okay. Yeah, Macon was one of the first Mississippi cities to have a Black woman mayor, right?
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And my mom went to college near there.
Right.
A lot of history in Mississippi.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I went to Ole Miss with Bill Ferris when Bill Ferris was there over the Southern Studies Department.
Wow, I know Bill Ferris.
Oh, I know you do. Especially after he went to the NEH.
Yeah.
But I wanted to, one of the things that happens in the doc, you have a lot of the historians worried about how people will view Dr. King and his legacy. But as I was watching it, I was just like, how will people view the FBI? Because for me, with all of this information, how did you not prevent his murder? So I was interested in your take on that.
Well, you know, that's my question too. You saw I asked that question of Andy Young, and he kind of dovetailed it. You know, he says he doesn't think James Earl Ray is the one who assassinated King, but he wouldn't go any further. You know, I asked that question to both Chuck Knox, the former FBI agent, and others in the film. How could the FBI, when they were monitoring King so closely, not be aware that there were possible assassins out there? It just doesn't make sense. You know, as Chuck Knox says, anytime King and his associates were moving to another city, the FBI had all hands on deck. I meant that they were sending agents there to bug those hotel rooms, to wiretap those rooms. You know, they listened to anything that was going on with King. They were probably taking photos of Dr. King and everything. So it just doesn't make sense that they could not have been aware of someone like James Earl Ray, whoever might have assassinated Dr. King. It just doesn't make sense at all.
So is that your next documentary?
I got another one coming out next month, but about Black visual artists. People like Carol Walker and Carrie James Marshall and Glenn Lagan and Amy Sherrill. So yeah, I got a bunch of other films coming out.
Excellent.
I have a second question for you, and it's kind of related to the FBI question. So one of the things that we learned in this documentary is that the FBI began to use the Hollywood and the film industry to create propaganda about the FBI. They wanted to create a certain image, and that has actually become extremely popular, almost to the point where it's a part of the Hollywood fabric when it comes to action film. So what about you? What do you as a filmmaker and as someone so intricately involved with the film industry think about how the FBI and the military and the US military industrial complex has become such an intrinsic part of the Hollywood industry as a whole?
Well, I don't think, I think they've always been there. I think that the Hollywood industry worked hand in hand back in the 30s and the 40s with organizations like the FBI, basically to propagate the mythology that they were these great organizations that were going to fight good, fight and destroy evil. I mean, that's why we use these clips from some of these Hollywood films in the 40s and the 50s. And there was that seminal show that was made on television about the FBI, so, I think that the notion that Hollywood was distinctly different from what was going on with the government is no. I think that back then they were working hand in hand. And even today, if you watch some of these television shows, the shows about the FBI and CSI, I mean, it's the same stuff all the time. They're creating the mythology of these organizations, that they're fighting on the side of right. Now, I'm not saying it's not bad in the world, but you have to watch all these things with a grain of salt. You got to be able to look at these things and not buy into all of these things by all these different organizations, because and I know that there are dirty deeds being done by them all the time.
Mr. Pollard, Reggie Ponder again. My question is around the reputation, or what you really want people to take away about Dr. King. And I want to couch it in this way, is that I was going to say a lot of white folks don't really know King. They know I Have a Dream, and that's basically all they know. But then I had to step back and say a lot of Black folks don't know King. They know I Have a Dream, and that's all they know, because my kids, if they didn't learn stuff from me, they would have gotten it from their schools, and their schools don't teach that much anyway. So watching this could, for some people, maybe say, oh yeah, he was flawed, and then they don't know anything else but I Have a Dream. So how did you think this was going to fit in the puzzle of information overall about Martin Luther King?
Here's my answer to that, Reggie. I think it's just a piece. I'm a great believer that every time one makes a film or writes a book, that's not the only way you're supposed to look at these things. It's supposed to raise your curiosity and want to explore that subject matter even more. Pick up another book, watch another film, because you're going to hear different perspectives on people. That's what's interesting about history. There's not one way to look at history. There's many ways to look at history. And I think this is just one way. This is Sam Pollard and Ben Hadid's way. There's another way that someone else will come along and make a film about King with another approach. As you all know, there's many films about Dr. King that's out there now, and they all take very different approaches about who this man was and his importance and his legacy. So never take this as the holy grail. This is it. No. This is just one filmmaker's perspective on the relationship that he's dug into. Now, someone else may come along and find another way to unfold this story, and that's what you do. That's my job.
I accept that too. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for Mr. Pollard for taking time out to speak with us today. On behalf of the world's largest group of Black film critics, thank you for watching the AAFCA Roundtables, and have a great day.
Thank you very much. Everybody enjoy your day.
Absolutely.
Be good. Bye.
You too.
Thank you very much.